Today on The State of Us, is there a solution to school shootings and gun laws in America? Welcome to The State of Us. I'm your host, Justin T. Weller, joined, of course, today by the one and only, the senior resident historian here at TrueChat and educator of 35 years, Mr. Lance L. Jackson. Today, we're talking about what I think is on a lot of people's mind. There obviously was a recent school shooting in Texas, but it is not the only school shooting that we've talked about on this program. Sadly, over the years, we've talked about many of them. We've also discussed gun laws in this country. Today, we're going to look at both. We've written down a number of items that are kind of coming up as part of this conversation, and we're going to ultimately try to answer that question. Is there a solution? Is there a thing that can be done to make a difference on this? And of course, depending on who you ask, you get a wide range of answers. So what we're going to do is try to look at those different answers and talk about how they might be valid, but also how they might be invalid. So that's what we're looking at today. But before we dive in, Lance, do we have a word of the day?
We do. It's a simple word. One syllable, 6 letters. Truth. Fourth definition in Webster's New Collegiate Dictionary, circa 1985. A particular belief or teaching regarded by the speaker as the true one. Truth suggests conformity with the facts or with reality, either as an idealized abstraction or in actual application to statements, ideas, acts, etc. Truth. What is the truth? And do we really want to know the truth? Or do we want our fears to be calmed so that we can go back to what we always do and be scared when it happens again? Do we really want to know what the truth is on issues such as this?
Oxford's dictionary tells us the second definition of truth is a fact or belief that is accepted as true.
Or as Jack Nicholson once said in a movie as a Marine, he looked at the judge, adjutant general, and said, "You can't handle the truth," when asked about what had actually occurred in an incident involving the military. Looked and said, "You can't handle the truth." And is that where we are?
Maybe.
In America now.
Maybe.
When it comes to gun control and school shooting. I mean, I'm not sure anybody's out there saying, "Oh, this is a good thing." No, nobody's saying that. This is horrible. It's awful. The loss of these children and these teachers and the effect on the community. But what is the truth? Can we do something to stop it, or are we just assuaging our fears for the time being because we were going to do everything after Parkland? We were going to do everything after the shooting in Connecticut. We were going to do something after the shooting in Arkansas. We were going to do something after the shooting at Columbine. We were going to, we're still here. We're still here.
So let's get into a few things that have come to mind as Lance and I are thinking about this, other than I think the obvious thing, which hopefully goes without saying, the terribleness of this, which we all feel, right? Hopefully we all feel it, that we must do something. But as in many of these situations, what must we do? Well, people throw out a lot of ideas, and some people are very passionate about them. So let's take it one at a time and see what comes to mind. So Lance, talk to us about policy, because you and I were discussing this before the show, right? I mean, maybe what we need is more policy, right? I mean, maybe if we required schools to be locked or controlled entry points, or we stationed security guards, maybe that would fix things. No?
Well, we're finding out information, obviously, on a daily basis as the investigation continues in this most recent tragedy. But there was a security guard on hand, and the related facts are that the security guard met the young man and didn't stop them, even though he was obviously had a rifle over his shoulder. So there's your security guard. It's in place. It didn't work. My understanding, and I don't know if this is a federal law, but I know it was where I taught, the law was that all entrance points had to be locked and secured from any outside entry. And it appears that this shooter found a door that was unlocked. So again, the policy, I'm assuming, and I don't like to assume, but I think the policy would be that all those doors should have been locked. Well, they weren't. Point is, does policy solve the problem? What is the truth? The truth is you can have all the policies you want. And yes, more policies might lead to more layers of stopping something from this from happening, but it comes down to human error when it comes to policies. The policies can be in place. You shared one, about mental health and, cruelty to animals. And again, seems like what's coming out is this person had a propensity of hurting animals. And again, nobody reported it. There was nothing in their record, even though there seems to be some video and eyewitness accounts of this young person hurting animals. So again, we have policy, but nobody acted on it. Hence, we have a tragedy. So what is the truth about policies? We can pass policies. Will it stop what's going on if nobody steps up to enforce the policies or to make sure the policies are followed? And again, how do you do that when you're dealing with humans?
Yep. Well, in a lot of states, Texas is one of those where they require certain things, but they leave a lot of decisions up to local schools as well. And there's to say nothing of, let's just say theoretically, right, that it's federally required that all schools do that, lock all entrances. Well, this school's entrance was probably supposed to be locked, but it wasn't. So there's always that human error / system not working / those things happen, right? That it's not going to be a foolproof solution. Because there are different ways for people to evade, that system.
And as much as people want something to work, is there that foolproof policy, right? Because as long as you have humans implementing it or humans in charge of it, you always run the risk of human error. I believe the truth is there is no one set policy that can make this not happen again. That's not going to, it will make us feel better in the moment. Hey, we did something. We did something great, because just to stand here and to see this happen time and time again is just, I have no control over things. I have no control over this, my life, anything, right? So if we pass policy, now I have control over it until it happens again.
So from the National Center for Education Statistics, Lance, in the 2017-18 school year, 95% of public schools reported that they controlled access to school buildings by locking or monitoring doors during school hours. Other safety and security measures reported by public schools included the use of security cameras to monitor the school, 83%, a requirement that faculty and staff wear badges or picture IDs, 70%. In addition, 27% of public schools reported the use of random sweeps for contraband, 20% required that students wear uniforms, 9% required students to wear badges or picture IDs, and 5% used random metal detector checks. One thing that emerges here too is, okay, controlled access, right? Great. I can just tell you from experience at our local schools, there's controlled access, but how controlled is controlled access? And I guess what I mean there is, I'm somebody that showed up at the school many times before. They see who it is. They let me in. They don't know that I have a gun, and they have no reason really to suspect me. They've seen me before. I've been here before. And that's part of the issue I think that you get into with this too, is some of these students, right, a lot of times they go to these schools. They're students at these schools. So, yes, there are obviously the cases where it's like, okay, this is a random stranger. What are you here for? Why, that's going to, obviously all of that's going to initiate some more thoughts. But even the controlled access, when I think about it, you got the camera, right? And you're getting buzzed in. Are they really going to be able to tell that you have a gun or ill intent? I mean, yes, again, some people, and maybe it's worth doing for that, because I think that's the larger conversation we're going to talk about as well, is the value of what we do, right? If doing controlled access stops some person who is obviously, coming to the school with ill intent, and the people in the office can see that, and they're like, hey, you're sorry, can't come in right now. They can call the authorities and the person can't get in. Okay. We saved lives, right? So then is it not worth doing if that is the thing? I guess the other thing that comes to mind, if that's the case and they get upset, the front doors of the school are glass. So, I can just shoot the door and step through it, right? And again, this is not, I don't think Lance and I are trying to be negative Nancy. I think what we're trying to point out, and it doesn't mean that some of this isn't worth doing, is that we're going to look at some other things here too. I'm not sure, Lance, that there is anything that you can do, right, that is just going to be like, well, now we don't have to worry about this because it's handled. It's taken care of.
And human emotion is, well, something horrible happened. I need to do something to fix it. I understand that. But what is the truth?
And that's part of what we're going to talk about, because, of course, we can't talk about this conversation without talking about gun laws and how that could impact what could take place. So we're going to look at red flag laws, gun laws, how hate and ideology are playing into it. Are video games to blame? Should teachers have guns? There's a lot still to talk about on this issue, and we're going to dive into all of it, but that'll be upcoming in the next segment. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back. Is there a solution? Anything that can bring the truth forth and get us all on the same page? I think the answer to that is no. I wish that was not the case. But no, I do not think there is a single answer that will bring Americans collectively together and solve this problem. Because, as I have said, Lance, I think every time we have talked about this, there are many issues at play. Could we do more with gun laws? Sure. Could we do more with controlled access? Yes. Could we address hate and ideology, mental health? Yes. Could we look at how video games and social media are playing into what we're teaching students at young ages? Sure. Could we arm, teachers? Yep. We could do all of those things, right? All of those things, we can do those things. Will any of those things, snap your fingers, no more school shootings? No, I don't think so. That does not mean that I'm saying we shouldn't do some of those things. But I think that is part of the mistake in this debate that I get so tired of hearing about on other sides. Well, if we just did this, it'd all be fine. No, it will not, Now, it may get better, and better is good, okay? I'm not saying it's not. I just want to set expectations, because my fear is that if we actually decide to do something, when that something fails, then everybody will be like, well, there's, really no point in trying anything else because we did this thing and it didn't work. There's still school shootings. I'm not sure I think we have to be realistic about what our goals are, I guess is what I'm getting to. So what about gun laws, Lance? What do we do here? What do we got to do to keep schools safe? Is tightening gun laws going to make schools safer? How's that?
I don't think it hurts. And that's just my personal opinion. Obviously, if there are fewer guns out there in the hands of people, then the likelihood of somebody shooting somebody else diminishes, right? It's the law of probability. But what we know from the pandemic, that there are more guns out there now in America than there ever have been, according to the NRA and other people who study this, the police. There are more guns out there than ever before because people, weren't sure that somebody could get to them and protect them. So they sold a bunch of guns in the last couple of years. Not that there weren't plenty of guns out there before, but I think, logically, the fewer guns that are available, then the fewer people that have them, the less shootings would take place. And I understand the argument against it. Does that mean I believe that it would stop everything? No, because then even if you have laws in place, you have people who got it legally and decided to sell it illegally, or people who got the guns illegally and are selling them illegally because people want them. And so they make money for them. So honestly, the truth, can we get rid of guns? No. But if we had fewer guns, I think there would be fewer people dying by guns. And that's not a kumbaya. To me, that's just a mathematical ratio logic. So that's kind of how I feel. But I don't think it solves the problem. I don't think school shootings go away if you tighten the gun laws.
Because, to your point, it's like the other solutions we've talked about. Nothing is foolproof. Now, could it help? Yes. Let's talk about, though, where Americans are at on gun laws. Pew Research Center. 4 in 10 U.S. adults say they live in a household with a gun, including 30% who say they personally own one. So guns are a relatively familiar fixture in a fair share of Americans' lives. There's also a majority of Americans who are not familiar with that. Number 2, personal protection tops the list of reasons why gun owners say they own a firearm. Roughly 6 in 10, 63%, said this is an open-ended question. Considerably smaller shares gave other reasons, including hunting, 40%, non-specific recreation or sport, 11%, and that their gun was an antique or family heirloom, 6%, or that the gun was related to their line of work, 5%. Around half of Americans, 48%, see gun violence as a very big problem in the country today. Attitudes about gun violence differ widely by race, ethnicity, party, and community type. About 8 in 10 Black adults say gun violence is a very big problem, by far the largest share. By comparison, about 6 in 10 Hispanic adults and 39% of white adults view gun violence this way. Roughly half of Americans, 53%, favor stricter gun laws, a decline since 2019, according to the Center's April 2021 survey. Smaller shares say these gun laws are about right, 32%, or should be less strict, 14%. The share of Americans who say gun laws should be stricter has decreased from 60% in September of 2019. Americans are divided over whether restricting legal gun ownership would lead to fewer mass shootings. Debates over the nation's gun laws have often followed recent mass shootings, but Americans are split over whether legal changes would lead to fewer mass shootings, according to the same spring 2021 poll. There is broad partisan agreement on some gun policy proposals, but most are politically divisive. Majorities in both partisan coalitions favor 2 policies that would restrict gun access. That is, preventing those with mental illness from purchasing guns. 85% of Republicans and 95% of Democrats support this. And subjecting private gun sales and gun show sales to background checks. 70% of Republicans, 92% of Democrats. Majorities in both parties also oppose allowing people to carry concealed firearms without a permit.
Oh, so we have another issue in America where we're split and evenly divided.
The thing that's very interesting to me is the first 6 points, right? Americans aren't on the same page. But then when you ask Americans about gun policies, what do you think gun policies should be? You have 2 things that you have over a 2/3 majority agreement on in both parties. And another thing that you have a majority in both parties on, so you have America, right? I mean, you have the vast majority of America that agrees that people with mental illness should be prevented from purchasing a firearm and that private gun sales and gun show sales should be subject to background checks. But neither of those things are federal law.
It's like we've said before, it's not impossible to get elected as a politician by doing what the majority of your party wants. But when you're controlled by the minority in your party and you're afraid of them because, well, they're going to go out and vote or they're the ones who give you money or whatever, then things don't get done, right? We've talked about this for the last 7 or 8 years on this show, that there are all kinds of policy groups out there who do these surveys who say on these 6 or 7 major issues, here's 70% of Americans agree on this one. 70% of Americans agree on this one. 82% of Americans agree on this one. 66% of Americans agree on this one. But we can't get the legislative branch to pass a law. What I'm referring to mostly is this group called No Labels, who's out there, who's talked to people, and they've produced these policy books annually who take the top 10 issues facing America and they talk to people. And it's amazing. The majority of these issues have majority support for one answer. And we can't get legislation passed on them. And this isn't new. This isn't a 2022 thing. This is, since No Labels has been around for the last decade or so. They've done this and talked to politicians and tried to get broad-based partisan support for different laws and show the politicians that, look, 65%, 75% of the people in your party who vote want this to happen. And they go, well, that's really good. And then when it goes on the floor, nope, we have to argue against it because, we have this group over here within our party who doesn't want it. And that's Republicans and Democrats. They don't want it. And so we're not going to support it, even though the majority of the people in my party and the majority of the people who vote for my election want it. I'm still not going to do it because there's this small group within my party that doesn't want it, this small group of voters who don't want it, and I'm not going to do that to make them angry.
It doesn't behoove them to succeed, or at least they don't think that it does, right? What do you mean? They live here too. They're people. Well, I think we know that the majority of them want to stay elected. That's what they want. And school shootings and debating guns, and that's good for re-election. Good stuff to run on. And if we, addressed the issue.
Right. If we solve that problem, now what's going to be my next campaign issue?
Right. And that sounds terrible. I mean, it sounds cold-hearted, but it is terrible. It is cold-hearted. But I think it's also a reality, not just on guns, right?
Is it also the truth?
A ton of issues. It is, I think.
To the word of the day? I mean, is it also the truth?
I believe so.
And I think that's what we're trying to point out to people, is that there are some solutions, right? That's what you're trying to say. There are some, not that it would go away, but we can make the situation better. And the truth is, the politicians really don't want to address any of these things that would make it better.
85% of Republicans and 95% of Democrats say, we don't want people with diagnosed mental illness purchasing guns. Okay, so we write a law that says, diagnosed with a current mental illness, you can't purchase a gun. Well, it's more complicated than that. Well, why? Why? Well, there's nuance. Okay, well, mental illness, fine. I'll give you that one. But let's go to the next one. Private gun sales and gun show sales have to do background checks. 70% of Republicans, 92% of Democrats. So I don't know, in my mind, Lance, we might write a law that says gun sales of all types require background checks. And define, are we talking about a federal background check, which in this case, we are. So that is a weak, no good, bad argument. That is what lawmakers are telling you so that they don't have to do the work. And it is literally their job to actually do that work. In many states in our union, Ohio is one of those states, and in many municipalities, in this union, we have something called citizen initiative. Now, different states call it different things. You may have heard of citizen referendum. Referendum, at least in the United States, usually refers to a citizen's power to overturn a law that has been passed, and in some cases recall an elected official, right? Basically fire them. Interestingly, while this power exists for those purposes, there's also citizen initiatives, which aren't as commonly heard about, but it is essentially in simple forms, where the citizens say, this is something we want, and we're not going to be waiting on our lawmakers to do it. We're going to get a certain number of signatures on a petition. A board of elections is going to certify that is valid, and then it's going to be put to a vote of the people. And if the people say this is what's going to happen, then it becomes law. Most notably in Ohio, one of the most recent and wide-ranging big citizen initiatives that took place was an amendment to the Ohio Constitution by the citizens of Ohio, which changed how our district lines are drawn. So it can be done. I mean, that was just a few years ago that we did that. Point is, isn't it interesting that that doesn't exist at the federal level? No mechanism for that. None at all. But in local politics, you can do that. So give that a thought here, and we've got more to talk about. Keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back. So when we talk about people agree on this stuff, Lance, I mean, the way that I understand the law, tell me if I'm nuts, but like in the state of Ohio, we could do something about this, right? I mean, right now,
yes,
there are legal mechanisms in our state that say me and you are tired of this crap, because are those things like we talked about before, they're not going to fix the problem, right? It's not going to go away because we suddenly start requiring all gun sales to go through background checks. Could it help, and would it potentially prevent and save thereby students' lives? Yes. And you might say, well, do we really know that? Well, again, the majority of Americans agree doing that, but just in case there's any question as to whether or not that actually has any real effect. After a British gunman killed 16 people in 1987, Lance, the country banned semi-automatic weapons like those that he had used. It did the same with most handguns after 1996 school shooting. It now has one of the lowest gun-related death rates in the developed world. In Australia, a 1996 massacre prompted mandatory gun buybacks that saw, according to some estimates, as many as 1 million firearms melted into slag. The rate of mass shootings plummeted from once every 18 months to, so far, only one in the last 26 years. Canada tightened its gun laws after a 1989 mass shooting. So did Germany in 2002, New Zealand in 2019, and Norway last year. Only the United States, whose rate and severity of mass shootings is without parallel outside of conflict and war zones, has so consistently refused to answer those events with tightened gun laws. So the evidence tells us that doing the thing that Americans want to do will have an impact.
Well, and the problem is there are people with power and people who have money who will use their power and money and influence to try to stop you. So how dedicated, how big of a push is it going to take? And will people stay with it? Because we're talking about, TikTok 15-second attention spans. So are people willing to fight the fight and do this, And it's hard to even discuss this when you point out all of the other Western nations, right? Industrialized worlds, thing that the people we have the most in common with, who have done this. And then you look at what it's done for the number of shootings. As we said, doesn't mean it's going to go away. But as we said in the first segment, it will make it better. And yet we refuse to do it. Is it possible to do something to make the situation better? Yes. Is it possible to do something to make the situation go away? No. But we're not even settling for making it better. We're just letting it stay status quo and then be hurt, amazed, shocked when it happens. Definition of insanity, right?
Again and again and expecting a different result.
Right. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. If we don't change anything, this will continue to occur. You don't want to change anything? That's fine. Then deal with the truth that this will continue to happen. That we will have armed humans walking into schools or standing outside of schools and shooting our children and our educators.
The point is it can be solved, and there are mechanisms to solve it. Those of us listening to this program who aren't elected officials, should we have to go do citizen initiative and referendum and patch meal this across states in our country? No, we should not have to. But should we do that if that's what's available and necessary? I guess it depends on how much you care about saving kids' lives. So there are things that can be done. It can be addressed in most states in the union. I think that we should be able to address it at a federal level. But the other thing is, Lance, history tells us, right, I think fairly conclusively, that if some states start to do this and it's seen to be popular and effective, the federal government may follow suit, because we have a long history in this country of that being how things become federal law.
Right. I mean, the federal government followed the states when it comes to women's right to vote. There were numerous states. It was a 30, 40-year fight and process to allow women to vote. And it was mostly in the western states at first, and then started to move across the country. And then when, oh my gosh, they looked around and said, well, gee, add an amendment to the Constitution, you have to have this percentage of states vote for it to put it in the federal Constitution. Well, gee, we have more states than that already allow women to vote. So, hey, yeah, we'll do this now. Look at us. We're out here fighting for women's suffrage. We're going to give women the right to vote. Yeah, because the number of states necessary to make it happen and put it in the Constitution have already passed it on their own without you. So a good examples of great federal leadership. To your point, most major changes are going to happen from the root cause of the people and the states. And that's what's going to get the federal government to do something, not the other way around.
So red flag laws, video games, red flag laws, right? Quickly, we already kind of addressed that, Lance. Issue is that people have to flag something, right, for it to be effective.
Right. I mean, if you have a policy or a law, somebody has to bring it to somebody's attention and somebody has to act on it for there to be a record of it, so that then it can be put into the system, so that then someone can't buy a gun or somebody can't have access to ammunition or whatever, reference to the football game. Somebody got to throw the flag for there to be a penalty. If there's no flag thrown, then there was no penalty, right?
And that is how it works. So again, we could do something there. That one, there's not as much polling as data on. Video games, which I think, Lance, plays into the hate and ideology component that is just worth mentioning, if nothing else. You want to get to the root of the problem, like we like to do on this show, right? Hate, illness, right? Those are, at the end of the day, they are the root of the problem. How you're choosing to deal with them, the means by which you address them. That's
how you deal with the problems in your life is
yes.
what causes this.
Yes. And are video games the primary contributing factor? Well, the State of Us did a great show on that. You should check it out. It's very interesting. Do video games help? No. Are they the sole reason this happens? No. Should we be more cognizant of what children are spending time on social media and how it affects their mental health? Yes. Resounding yes, right? I mean, that's not just guns. That's just, we have, kids with a lot of problems in this country right now, Lance. So many.
The rise of mental health issues among the young, it's not just the phone, but it's part of it.
Suicide,
it's not just the pandemic, but that's part of, but again, it's not just waking up and saying, gee, kids who go to school like me just got shot. That's going to cause mental issues, right? So why don't we work on all of these things and try to just chip away at the problems to make it overall, I know I'm old. Okay. I understand I'm old, but when I went to grade school, back, when they took me in the horse and wagon to school and picked me up.
5 miles to school uphill both ways?
Exactly.
Okay.
This was never on my mind.
You weren't worried about people shooting up your school?
Not once. And yes, I went to a small elementary school, but I went to school in a major metropolitan area. Never crossed my minds through, 1979.
You didn't do active shooter drills
when I graduated? No.
Oh, okay. So it doesn't have to be this way.
Right. There, and I'm not saying things were better back then. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying there was something going on that didn't cause this. Okay. That doesn't mean we didn't have our own problems. We didn't have our own issues. I was bullied and, there were fights at school but we weren't talking about people bringing guns to school and shooting up the schools. Wasn't happening. Okay. So we were doing something to stop that aspect. Were there other problems and other issues? Yes. Okay. Do we need to deal with those as well? Yes. But doggone it. This is a crazy place right now with all the stuff that's going on. That's the truth.
And I think, Lance, that our audience can handle the truth.
I hope so. That's why we do the show.
That's part of why we're here, right? Supposedly.
Because we have a mission, and our mission is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. Maybe we need to add the word truth in there. Because we think you can handle the truth. And if we don't talk about the truth, then we really can't find a solution, folks. That's the key, right? If we all talk around the issues and can't have an honest conversation about it, then we can't find any common ground to try to make things better. And that's what we try to do here. And hopefully you enjoy the show, share it with others. If they want to know how to listen to us, we're out there as a podcast on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and everywhere podcasts are found.
The couple episodes, folks, if you just go to the State of Us website, thestateofus.org, and you look through our episodes, you're going to find July, November, October, April, December. There's a lot of content out there on kids, and a couple of them that come to mind: Instagram for kids and States Say No, how to limit kids' screen time, challenges for kids, lack of trust, location, and mental health. Kids can learn from losing, civics to unify a nation. Kids do chores, and why are non-voters younger? No homework and failure resistance for kids. Should kids do chores? And why are non-voters younger? So the point is, we've been covering this now. I mean, these episodes date all the way back to 2018, Lance. For at least the last 4 years, we've been talking kids' mental health, screen time, how that plays into what type of adults they become and what decisions they make. Highly would recommend checking out some of those episodes. We're heard on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the morning as a podcast, also on the weekends on AM and FM radio stations across the country. For the State of Us on True Chat, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to producer Bradley Butch. Thank you all, our audience, for tuning in. We will see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.